right, good morning. Welcome to, it is promptly 11:30, so I'm going to go ahead and call our meeting to order. And Carrie, will you please do a roll call for our board members?
You bet. Galavis,
Here.
Clenny,
Here.
Magnuson,
I see him.
Phil, you're on.
All right, here.
That's okay. Thank you. Pantera, Westonsko.
Here.
4 board members present. Oh, Pantera just joined.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Carrie. Welcome everyone to today's meeting. Before we start, I do believe we have an introduction, and I do see a new attendee there. Would you like to share that with us, Jessica?
Yes, I'm happy to share with board members that we have a new city council liaison for the year. And he's been able to join us. This is Councilmember Jimmy Halliburton. He will be stepping into that liaison role and helping the board and me make sure that we stay connected and moving forward on strategic initiatives. And Lisa Sanchez will move as our alternate. So Councilmember Halliburton, welcome, and could you say hello to my fabulous board, please?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. I'm so excited to be here today. Every single year, our council members, we get to kind of pick what our liaison assignments are. And I've been the newest city council member for a while, so I haven't had seniority in picks. And this year, I got one of my top picks, which was the library. I'm super excited to be here. I'm also sort of your neighbor in my other role at the Boise Bicycle Project across the street from the main library. And I know that Jessica knows this story, but the library in 2007 is where I really started working on putting together the Boise Bicycle Project. And it was the help of library staff in 2008 that really helped us with our 501c3 application and kind of setting up our founding documents. And that was the year, where the Great Recession really started. And it was also a year where a lot of important nonprofits and really great nonprofits in the communities got their starts as well. And I'm excited to be on this committee at this time because I think that the library is going to play a really important role in helping our community emerge from this pandemic. So I'm mostly going to be sitting here in the background, being helpful, where I can, and making sure that if there's anything that I can do as far as a voice for our entire city council, and then relaying communications back and forth, that I'm here to support. But lots of experience in nonprofits, lots of experience on boards, and lots of time spent in the library. So I'm really excited to be here.
It's good to have you, Jimmy.
It is great to have you on board. I think I've had a chance to meet you through Leadership Boise, and you definitely have a passion for our community. And so hands down, I'm pretty sure we're the best board that is out there. We have a lot of great boards out in the community, but we're very partial. We all have a passion for the library and all the services it does. So thank you for for choosing the library. And we have a great city council to work with. So thank you for joining us. Okay, moving on then. We'll start the agenda. So we know current communication. So the next up is our meeting minutes as an action item for approval. Fellow board members, have you had a chance to review the meeting minutes?
Yes.
I will stand if there's any corrections. If not, I'll look for a motion to accept the meeting minutes.
I've read the minutes carefully. I feel they reflect accurately the meeting on January 12th, and I move that we approve them as written.
Okay, do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Nikki. All in favor?
Aye.
Hi.
None opposed? All right, thank you, Brian. Okay, next up on the consent agenda is another action item in regards to the payment of the bills and payroll and the financial reports. I trust that you have all had a chance to look through those, and if there's any questions, we'll open that up. Otherwise, I'll look for a motion to accept those.
I'll move we accept the financial statements and payments as provided.
Okay, do I have a second?
Second.
All right, thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
None opposed, motion carries. Thank you, board members. Okay, Okay, next up, we have our reports from the Friends of the Boise Public Library. And I believe, I don't have my glasses on, but I believe I see Jill up there.
I am here indeed. Can you hear me?
Yes, we
Great.
can. Thank you, Jill.
So just a couple of quick things today. We have gotten some bookmarks in the printing process that list all of our sale dates for calendar year 2022, and we're planning on distributing them to the branches and having them available for folks to know so they can plan to attend all of our sales going forward this year. And then on a friend's housekeeping issue, we are deep in the process of designing and standing up our own independent website, which we hope to have done in the first half of this year. So our website got eaten at the beginning of COVID and was unrecoverable. And so we've finally seized the bull by the horns and are getting back with a more public facing front than rather just having a Facebook page. So that's pretty much all I have today.
That is a great report there, Jill. Thank you for that. We have a question from our fellow board here, Brian.
Yeah, and I'm stepping back in the agenda. I'm sorry, I was a little slow on this one.
Okay.
On the financial statements, I don't want to lose, we had an action item. We were going to maybe have a separate session where we went through how we could present them differently so that they were all more meaningful to us as trustees. And I just wanted to make sure we didn't lose that.
Okay. Okay. Thank you for that feedback. Any other additional questions for Jill with the Friends of the Boise Public Library? All right, hearing none. Thank you, Jill, for your update. Very much appreciated. Thank you for all the hard work you and the Friends are doing. Next up, we have the Boise Public Library Foundation report, and that is, looks like I've got Brian Manship on here. Good morning, Brian.
I hope you can hear me.
Yeah.
All right, very good. So from the foundation, last month, January 13th to be exact, the foundation held its annual meeting. And at that meeting, we had elections that were due. And I want to report that the following has taken place. Only one change from what was previous was made. But I was once again elected as chairman of the foundation, and Camille Franks is now the vice chair, which is a new role for her, and we're really excited for that opportunity for her and for us. And then Ron Williams as secretary, Doug Ochtemeyer as treasurer, and as assistant treasurer, assistant secretary treasurer, Mike Turner was also appointed to continue in that role. So we're excited about that new opportunity and going forward to work together. One of the exciting things that's happening right now, we do have a great opportunity because of the past 2-3 years that not much happening, and now an opportunity to move forward. We have an opportunity to of course, partner with the library, and we have funds that have been earmarked for literally for the for books and published materials. And so we are currently in the position of getting ready to approve the funding of some books, and that will take place early this year. And so we're excited to be in a position to do that. There is a fund that has been donated funds that have been there for a while that haven't been able to be used, but we're excited to make some progress on that and contribute to the library books and printed materials as it was earmarked. So that's coming up early this year, and that's all I really have for right now.
There's a question from Brian here as well.
Brian, last month, I recall you talked about hiring a administrative manager to assist you and the other board members in keeping everything organized, and I wondered how that's coming.
We have made some progress with that, but we don't have anybody currently. In our last meeting also, we have formed a committee, a smaller committee of directors on the board that are working on filling that position, searching first, of course, and filling that position. That committee is being chaired by our vice chair, Camille Franks, who's an HR person herself, a lot of experience. And so she is working with the committee. We hope to have a report at our next meeting in March as to where we are on that. So like I say, making some progress, but it has not been completed yet. But we are working towards that right now.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions for Brian with the foundation? Thank you, Brian, for your update. Please let the
You're welcome.
foundation
Thank
know
you.
we appreciate of their efforts. Thank you. Okay. Before we go to the library director report, can I just pause for a moment here? And I just wanted to clarify Brian's question in regards to the action item. Am I hearing for next
Yeah.
month's meeting, because at this month we're pretty tight with our agenda. Are you looking for a more in-depth? I just want to make sure I'm understanding what you're.
Yeah, you recall in our December board meeting, we were approving financials to be submitted to the city. And there was some confusion about what was prior year's budget, new year's budget, encumbered and unencumbered. And the presentation of the numbers were pretty much all New Year's, which left out a significant portion of the budget, which was the prior year's carry forwards. And we had talked about having a training session, an education session, perhaps some trustees meeting with library staff to talk about different ways of representing the data so that it was more meaningful. Does that ring a bell?
It does, it does. And so I think what we should be looking at is for the following,
Okay.
we need to kind of put our heads together.
About the
and get that more
timing on that.
digestible.
Okay.
Okay.
Let's talk about the timing on that because it is a.
Okay. Thank you for that. I wanted to make sure that we didn't miss your point there
Thank
as
you.
well. Okay, thank you. All right, so next up, Jessica, library director report.
Thank you. I will be brief. I just want to highlight a couple of things. I did want to acknowledge in January, because of staffing shortages, we did need to reduce our hours at one of our locations at our Cole and Houston branch. A combination of vacant positions and staff that were out temporarily meant that we did need to close early some evenings. We had to move to curbside one Saturday, and then there was a Monday that we actually just did not have the staff to run the building. So we try to adjust and cover the busiest times first whenever possible. As we talked about in January, did a big notice to the public physically and then on social media. It's never ideal to not have those services open, but we were able to adjust and be open as much as we possibly could at that time, but did acknowledge that we did need to change based on our staffing capacity constraint. And to that point, we are hiring. If you've ever had somebody who has expressed their dream job in a library, we definitely would encourage people to apply. This is an extremely tight hiring market, as I'm sure people are aware. And we're working to really better understand two things related to that. One, our vacancy rate, and then two, our turnover retention rate. This is some data that we're really starting to dig into. What are the jobs that we're having the hardest time filling and why? What roles are we seeing the highest turnover in? Why are people leaving the library or the city in general? And then what can we do to keep those good staff in place? So that is work that has risen really across the city, because we are seeing that this issue in this labor market right now pretty acutely. So we're digging into that. We'll have more to share on that. And then lastly, I wanted to do a quick update. If you remember from a couple months ago, we talked about a Lynx Assessment. So as a reminder, our library is one of 12 libraries that are in a Lynx consortium. And we as a consortium had contracted with a company to come in and do an assessment of that. And they're doing that work. One update is we had thought that in February, we would be having discussions with board members of those consortium libraries. But the consultant has recommended that that happen later after they've been able to do some more refinement of their preliminary recommendations. So I know, Nikki, you said you'd be willing to do that, and I didn't want you to think that we'd forgotten that. It's just the consultants came back to the directors and said, we think we need a little bit more work to do on what we think that those recommendations would look like sort of over a 3-year period before we bring in the board members. So I just wanted to add that little bit of information. And with that, I'll stand for any questions.
Questions for Jessica?
Jessica, I was able to view via the link you provided, the city council meeting and
Yeah.
portion on hiring challenges.
Yes.
the city is facing. And I saw one graph and it looked like the library was in the biggest or second biggest deficit position relative to open positions.
Yes, so I know what your slide you're talking about. So Sarah Borden, our director of HR, had a slide that showed the vacancy rates at that moment in time when that data was. There are, it is a slice at a specific time so that different groups, depending on their police and fire, if they have a big academy that has just been filled, they just look smaller. There's also a difference between how our finance group looks at our vacancy rate and how HR, based on some of the classifications we have. So we think our vacancy rate is actually functionally closer to like a 11-12% than I think she showed 24.
Yes.
Because of the move that we're making in some of the classifications. Either one is too high.
Yeah.
But it is, we don't believe that it's that 24%. We think it's closer to the 11-12.
And is the applicant rate lower than normal?
For us, I saw her high level number. And I don't know what ours specifically, our applicant rate is.
Thank you.
I'm glad you watched that. I thought that was really interesting. And
Yeah.
one of the things we are going to work with is to look at some of that data at the library level as opposed to the aggregate across the city.
Just another example of how we at the library are also impacted heavily, no matter where you go, but from that staffing perspective, and trying to find qualified applicants, and that much more important to try to retain where we can and support.
I think that was the big takeaway for me was the retention and how much turnover we're seeing. Because to that point, we have great staff, and if we can figure out how to keep them, that I think just benefits us, where we can be more effective in our programming. We're able to serve our community better. That I really want to dig into that going forward.
Yeah.
Jessica, this is Phil. In that vacancy rate, is it getting smaller or growing?
I don't know. That's a question we'll have to look at. I'll get back to you when we have a chance to really understand that rate.
Okay.
Any other questions for our director here? Okay, thank you for that update, Jessica. As always, got a lot of good information. All right, next up, we have facilities management as new business, and looking to get an overview of the management of city facilities, opportunities for better efficiencies. And I see Chloe Ross on here. I do believe that Chloe is there. Hi, Chloe.
I'm here. Hi, thank you. Let me just share my screen really fast.
Okay, thank you.
We have a slide deck. I thought I had it figured out, but hold, please. Here we go. Okay. Can you all see that?
Not yet.
Great. Oh, not yet. Is it it might be thinking?
It always seems like it's delayed a minute.
Oh, did it stop? I'm sorry. There we go. Thank you for bearing with me.
Thank you.
Okay, perfect. Great.
We announced the Cole and Houston. Nope. No, oh, it's bound. Sorry, it is bound. I was like,
Just keep you on your toes. Good.
Well, I'm leaving.
My name is Chloe Ross, and I work in the mayor's office as a program manager. You might recall that I presented to you with Kelly in the fall, I believe, on the updated nonprofit leases that the library has. And I am back here today to talk with you about something different I've been working on, but that interfaces quite closely with the library. With me today is my colleague Rob Bosefield from Public Works, and also Yorick DeTasney from the Facilities Service and Operations Group that also lives within the Public Works Department. Rob has a couple of slides he's going to cover, and then Yorick is here to answer questions in the event that they arise that pertain directly to his team and some specific technical knowledge that Yorick has. So today represents the first of 3 discussions that we want to have with you related to the Boise Library's facility maintenance. Today, I would like to set context and provide kind of an overview of the work that has been done to date to evaluate the maintenance landscape across the city. Then I will address how this impacts the library specifically and what we have identified as opportunity areas. And the goal is to really gather feedback from the board about what staff should be thinking about and information that we can gather for you all with the ultimate intention of approving the integration of the 3 maintenance positions that live in the library now into that facilities services team. So we have a lot of information for you, and we realize this is a complex endeavor, especially due to the unique role of the board and the role you play in library operations. And we intend to be very deliberate in our approach and communicative as well. This is why we want to start out with feedback from you and keep those lines of communication open throughout this process. We plan to iterate on our approach based on the input we hear from you today and in coming months and discussions. And our intention is to really find the best solution that serves library patrons and staff in the most effective and efficient manner possible. So first, I would like to start out by delineating what we are talking about when we say library maintenance. What we are talking about is really actual maintenance of the building. So everything from plumbing, electrical, HVAC, windows, doors, floors, roofs, walls, painting, etc., as well as those services that are provided maintenance-wise within the building, as well as outside of the building. So snow removal, groundskeeping, room setup, furniture moves, kind of anything that involves building or moving things. We also are including custodial services, which involves both emergency cleanups and then regular custodial services that are on a contracted basis. And then what this involves is really 3 full-time employees within the team, as well as various vendor contracts to come in and fill holes where the expertise does not currently live. What is out of scope is library operations and services, direct services and support functions that are provided by librarians and other staff, as well as library management and oversight. Those are things that we would like to leave to the board, to Jessica, and to the library staff. Now I'm going to hand this over to Rob. Based on this general definition of maintenance work, there are multiple other groups within the city government that carry out basically the same duties, but in other buildings. Knowing the scope of work across these teams is similar, and day-to-day tasks are in many cases identical, just as I said, in different buildings. The mayor asked staff to conduct an evaluation of kind of the current state of the maintenance function citywide, and that evaluation was completed 1 year ago this month. And that is what Rob is going to talk about. Rob, I'm going to move through and let me know when you would like the slides to be forwarded.
Sounds good, Chloe, thanks. President and trustees, again, Rob Bosefield, Public Works. I'm the facility program manager. Just super quick intro, part of my team, you actually, I think you may know Sean Wilson's part of my team, really handles planning, construction, design of facilities. And then the other half of my team is really headed up by Yorick Taskneets on this call. He's we call that the Facility Services and Operations Group. And we provide the facility management currently for City Hall, office type spaces, as well as fire stations. And as we think about facility management, again, think about the scope that Chloe just covered. Currently, this happens with different teams. It's somewhat fragmented. Yorick's team covers a big chunk of city buildings, but library has their own maintenance teams. Parks does as well. And so we, in an effort to really see, are we really doing things the best, or is there a better way to take care of our facilities? We launched this endeavor to really look at the best way to do it. And rather than trying to do it in-house, first thing we did is brought in kind of a facility management guru, went through a process, found somebody that really does this looks at facility management operations across the nation, and brought them in to do an evaluation. And the scope was how Public Works does our facility maintenance, as well as Parks, our housing community development teams, as well as the library team. And they came in, looked at our facilities, the types of operations, interviewed the maintenance staff, as well as management from all the different groups, really reviewed how each group was, the processes that they use, how they accomplish the work. They also looked at the finances, and then they really lined that stuff up against national benchmarks, comparison to best practices. What they found is, while the teams are actually performing well, that the processes really varied widely. How much teams focused on proactive versus reactive maintenance varied. And what I mean by that is, do you look at the water heater and say, these typically last, 12 to 15 years. This is like 11 years old. We better plan on replacing that next year, even though it's not actually broke yet, versus do you wait for it to go out? That's kind of the proactive versus reactive maintenance. They also found that there were potential ways to be more efficient, and as well as improve response by insourcing up to 6 staff. What we mean by that is, again, do we hire an electrician to change the lights, or are there enough lights being swapped out that makes sense for us to have an in-house staff person, electrician, that takes care of that? And so, again, they identified that there were some opportunities. Again, really, it felt like the teams were performing well, but that there were opportunities to to improve. Next slide, please, Chloe. There we go. And really what their recommendation was is if we consolidate operations rather than having a bunch of individual smaller teams, if we consolidate it under one larger team, that there were some benefits. How this would work is essentially how we, like right now, like in City Hall, we don't have multiple teams. Each department doesn't have their own team. Really, Yorick's team really serves as serving multiple departments. And this is what we're really talking about, is extending that concept. Again, we do the same kind of thing for fire stations right now. And so that's really the concept is, could we consolidate those teams into one larger team? The benefits that that the report noted, one was just a better efficiency, which means lower cost. And that could be everything from, if you think about like outsourcing contracts, like snow removal contract, if you have, as opposed to each group doing their own contract, if you have one larger, you can not only have less time spent bidding all these things, but it's also one larger contract. You can get some efficiencies of scale from the vendors. It felt like it could lead toward a more proactive maintenance, which translates to fewer, I'll say, surprise emergency repairs that disrupt operations, as well as less efficient cost-wise. Also better access to specialized skills. So like Yorick's team is large enough that we have an in-house electrician, to maintenance or to HVAC technicians, but with a lot of the other smaller operations, including the library, it's not big enough to support that an electrician. But again, if you consolidate, then you can in-source and really have those folks on staff rather than waiting, especially in this market, rather than waiting for an electrician to electrical contractor to answer the call and get freed up. You have that access in-house. As well as with a larger team, it really aids the maintenance workers, really provides them a better path, a better career path. There's different functions that they can advance in their career without having to leave the city. And it also spreads the load of things, such as the on-call kind of off-hours emergency response load, rather than it circulating among your existing 3 people. That can be a larger pool that gets spread out. So that's kind of the reason that we are launching down this path of looking at consolidating operations. And I would just maybe summarize the benefits by saying, in another sense, it really allows library operations to focus on what they know best, and that's providing library services. And rather than them learning about the types of roofs and stuff, it allows that to be specialized and focused in one central location. Back to you, Chloe.
Thanks, Rob. So based on that evaluation that Rob so eloquently described, and the benefits that we believe would be gained by the library, what we are proposing is moving those 3 facilities maintenance positions into the facility services and operations team that would then provide ongoing support and maintenance to all of the libraries in a larger group with more specialized skills. However, we are very well aware of the library board's obligation to oversee the budget and maintenance of all of the library facilities. You will see that I included specific language from the board's charter for this slide that discusses the maintenance as well as the budget for all of the facilities and rooms and properties. With that in mind, knowing we were coming to make this recommendation, we've been brainstorming and tracking sort of the mechanisms and methods that would ensure the board retains the proper oversight of the budget and maintenance work of the libraries. So we think that these mechanisms involve both reporting and documentation that also aligns with some of the budget conversation you all have been having, as well as just general processes and sort of presentation and information that you are receiving. These are the areas that we have identified as being integral to the integration and the board oversight. I want to be really clear that we're still in the process of examining and developing recommendations around these areas that we would then bring to the board in order for our efforts to be successful. So I have this slide and one more slide, and then want to pause for some feedback from the board about these areas, but let me just go through really quickly and kind of describe or give a little context around each of these. So first and foremost is the agreement between the Facility Services Operations team and the library board on what service levels the library would receive. So we have a document that covers duties and response times, and that would be shared with the board for review and discussion. And we're talking, as an example, the difference in response time to respond to something like a spill on the carpet versus a broken window versus a light bulb replacement. So really being crystal clear about what the level of service is going to look like when the response can be expected as being a predictable event. Staff is also currently working on developing a formula and method to charge for these maintenance services that would be similar to the HR or IT charging formula. Bringing people into FSO must also be accompanied by additional ongoing costs that are related to equipment and supplies. And so this would account for those components as well. We also know that the library board would still approve major repairs and maintenance projects on a yearly basis as part of the usual budget process. And then as part of that approval, we would look into other related approval processes for purchases and et cetera. So essentially that major repairs and maintenance, those projects would be approved by the library board, and then they would plug into the work plan of the FSO team to carry out through the year. The library board would see and approve those services, and the basic operating costs and services would be charged via a formula. Those special major repairs and maintenance would then be proposed to FSO, or they would be given to FSO then to plug into their to the work plan on a yearly basis. Related to that is this budget reporting component. So in addition, staff is looking at making adjustments to the way the board views the budget reports, and then developing a budget dashboard that would give a better sense of the story of the budget. And I think this is what we heard in past meetings from the board. It sounds like you've already provided some direction on what those budget reports would look like. This is a list that we specifically would address related to facilities maintenance. Here are the questions that we would like to address, and then information we would provide. We, as part of their operations, the facility services team uses a platform called ViewWorks. It tracks work orders, work done to date, sort of work in the future, and what the assets that we have and are maintaining at any given moment. We are able to bring that data that would be library specific into this budget dashboard. So you would really be able to see kind of, really on the ground, up to date information about what type of work is taking place at what libraries and costs and financials as well. So I would like to now pause and hear from the board. I'm particularly interested to know, have we covered what you would expect to see? If there are elements that we would need to keep in mind as we gather information and develop recommendations, I'm very curious to receive input.
Hey, Chloe, and Rob, that's a lot of great information. I think we're all kind of digesting that through. I really appreciated also hearing that we can anticipate seeing what that charging formula will look like as that's passed back, which similarly like the HR, IT. So I think that the board would be very interested to hear more as to how that is calculated. And I'm quickly looking through the budgeting reporting. I really like what I'm seeing in the way of the frequency and the content. But as I continue to look through it, I'm going to turn it over to my fellow board members for questions that may be coming up from each of you. Brian,
I have a question, Chloe or Rob, I'm not sure which. Relative to the in-scope activities that you presented earlier, this means that the library is completely dependent upon your organization for any facilities and capital improvement work. Is that correct?
President and trustee, this is Rob. So I wouldn't, in terms of dependent, I would say no, in that, I mean, the board and staff could certainly propose other capital requests. But essentially what I see is especially related to the existing facilities, and like if we need to replace the roof, large significant expense, it's our responsibility to recognize that, propose the cost, bring it to the board, and then for the board to review that request. But if you wanted to essentially, let's say, add another branch or do something else, it's not like it requires our approval. We would certainly hope that this would, work as a team process, as we've always done in the past on those capital projects. That's kind of where Sean and his team would bring in to help plan that, identify that. So I'm not sure if I'm answering the question or if I got off track.
Well, let me ask it a little differently. If we thought of the budget for this year for facilities and capital improvements as a plan, and in our role as trustees, we're trying to understand whether the library is executing to the plan or not, they really don't have any control over whether they're executing to the plan because all the work is done by your group.
I think the control would, I guess in terms of like having that control of like in-house staff versus, again, through that, it's really kind of goes back to that service level agreement of, we're following that agreement really dictates what we're, supposed to provide and supposed to execute. Ultimately, I think the control would be, I guess, the concerns would be raised through like the reporting process. But in terms of like having direct staff control, it would be very similar to, again, like, how you do like IT or legal advice. It's not a direct staff, but really a service that's essentially contracted for through this service level agreement.
I understand. Thank you.
Yeah, I think that to Brian's point, I think a lot of this is going to need to be clearly set out in that service level agreement. So I would just ask that we have adequate time to really review and give input on that. I wouldn't want to see it just for approval at the April meeting without us being able to kind of vet like these questions Brian's asking and making sure they're adequately addressed in that agreement so that we are set to make sure we have enough kind of reporting and input to fulfill our responsibilities. Otherwise, I think, what you've set out makes sense to me. And I appreciate the report Thank you.
This is Phil. I got a couple of questions. So at a nuts and bolts level, it seems like the library staff, and this is really a question, I think, for both Jessica and the facilities folks. At a nuts and bolts level, somehow the library has to identify, we need the light bulb changed. And so out of the 3 FTEs that the library has currently, are those people doing that? Or there needs to be a real clear process of what the library still has to do to even identify the needs?
Yeah, so if I could just chime in, I think what we have identified here is there's sort of the like everyday maintenance work that's taking place that is done by a certain group. And then we also have these capital, like these larger projects that are sort of longer term, need to be planned out and require some more capacity or more resources and maybe level of expertise. And so it sounds like having more information about sort of the delineation of those two and who's doing what and what the level of oversight of the board is on each of those separate components would be helpful.
Yeah, and it's, as I understand this, the cost of the major projects isn't really going to change. If you got to put a roof on, this isn't going to change the cost of that. So really it sounds like you're motivating this by more efficiencies in the realms of those 3 FTEs. And so I think in the financial reporting, it would be useful to show what those efficiencies are, either in terms of, okay, the library budget doesn't have to allocate as many dollars, or more maintenance gets done. Now, having said that, I suspect the 3 FTEs are a very small portion of the overall maintenance budget when you start talking about roofs. So, it may come down to just satisfaction levels of, does the library feel like the right work's getting done at the right time? And I think that would be important to incorporate.
Well, to your point, dear Phil, as well, I think we would gain the ability to have the power of, if you have to go out for a bid for I don't know, a roof, for instance, maybe we have that at several different facilities within the city. So we do really have that collective power versus the one-off for the electrician to come in and fix something at one library location, whereas having somebody on staff could really benefit, like the comment, could impact the library quicker and be more efficient than having to try to locate that one electrician that's going to, do that one small, to them, a small project. For us, it may be a good sized project, but maybe for that contractor, not so much. Any additional questions from the board? Additional input from this initial overview? I think, as you can tell, Chloe and Rob, the board will definitely be very interested in looking at the SLA, the details around the budgeting process, and how that will be that transparency. That will really help us moving forward.
And that has been really helpful to hear the questions and the concerns that have come up. And so what our intention is to come back to you in March to address the feedback we heard, present some recommendations on processes and information, and receive additional feedback and input. Our intention is to kind of bring those finalized changes to you in April for approval. I think we'll have to just continue to move forward based on the feedback and make sure that we're getting you all what you need. So thank you very much. We will see you in a month.
Thank you, Chloe.
Thank you, Chloe. Thank you, Rob. Thank you for joining us and providing the information. That's very helpful.
Great, thanks.
Okay, next up, we have old business, which is strategic planning with Cindy. Hello.
Hello. Hello, President and Trustees. Thank you for letting me join you today.
Thank you.
We've got some special guests as well. And Carrie Davis is going to be running the slideshow. Perfect, Carrie. Thank you so much. So I wanted to kind of let you know where we're at. So during the January board meeting, I presented to the board about the strategic plan and shared 4 slides showing the work team, project phases, schedules, and roles, and let you know that you get to meet some of the consultants in the February meeting. At that time, we were also waiting for the contract to be approved by City Council. So I wanted to let you know that the contract has since been approved on Tuesday, January 25th. And we've started to really dig into the work with Brian and Vivian, who have joined us today. Carrie, next slide, please. So today, this is what we'll be doing. We'll be introducing the work team to the Board of Trustees, confirming process and outcome goals for the strategic planning process, and reviewing a high-level schedule. So the bulk of what we really want to be here today for is to introduce you to that work team. So I'm very excited to turn it over to Brian from Work Consulting.
Hello, good afternoon, everyone. Trustees, very glad to be here to introduce myself and the team and answer any questions you may have about the planning process. If we could just go to the next slide, there's a slightly younger and better looking picture of me there. We'd just like to spend a few minutes to introduce ourselves, gives you a chance to get to know who you'll be working with. I'll share that we're very excited to be working with you on this process. We see it as an important and really well thought through planning process. We see a lot of RFPs and descriptions of strategic plans for libraries across the country. And what really captured our attention here is the desire to listen to the community, both during the planning process and to build strong mechanisms to continue to listen to the community as you move forward in implementing the ideas in the strategic plan and continuing to refine the services that you provide to the community. So very excited to be working with you. We'll each introduce ourselves briefly. I'm here to give you a sense of the background. I'm Brian Murphy again. I'm a principal with Burke. Burke Consulting is a Seattle-based consulting firm. We work with public sector, with not-for-profits, foundations, and anyone else working in the public interest. And we provide sort of strategic planning and policy analysis, land use planning, financial and economic analysis, and general management consulting. We do a lot of strategic planning, and I tend to lead our work in strategic planning with libraries, and actually cut my teeth on that back in 2011. I realized it was some time ago now, in a strategic plan for the Seattle Public Library. And that's where I got to meet Jessica, who was on the library team, and then Susan Hildreth, who was the Seattle City Library, city librarian at the time, and now a member of our team. I went on and worked with Luis, who you'll meet in a moment here as well, when he was at San Francisco Public Library. And we continue to do strategic planning work for libraries, both in Washington and elsewhere in the country. We're on our 3rd strategic plan now with Greenwich Library, as an example, over in Greenwich, Connecticut. And in addition to working with libraries, we do strategic planning work for other organizations. So kind of bring a interdisciplinary approach to strategic planning in libraries. And I can't say enough about the team that we have on this project, where we bring in some really deep, really strong subject matter expertise in libraries to help support the Burke focus on strategic planning and community engagement. So on this project, I'll be serving as the project manager, helping facilitate facilitating the meetings with the steering committee and the board engagements, and also leading some of the strategy development, but always hand in hand with the Boise team and with the others on the consulting team. So let me introduce you to Vivian, and then we'll give Luis and Susan each a chance to introduce themselves. I will speak for Carson as he's not able to join us today.
Thanks, Brian. Good afternoon, President and Trustees. It's very nice to be here. My name is Vivian Sabbath. I'm an associate principal at Burt Consulting, and I really specialize in community-led program evaluation and strategic planning. My portfolio of work really tends towards the children, youth, and family serving ecosystem. So that includes housing, schools, foundations, nonprofits, and of course, libraries. And in this project, I'll be mainly supporting the community engagement effort and analysis. And I'll also be backing Brian up with some project management. Off to you, Luis.
Yes, good afternoon, presidents and trustees of Boise Public Library. I'm just really excited to be part of the team working on your strategic plan. I have over 4 decades of experience in libraries, but I will say that I started as a school librarian in my former middle school in El Paso, Texas. But most of my experience has been in public libraries, from El Paso to library systems in California, San Diego, Long Beach, and then I served as director of the Pasadena Public Library for 10 years. And then most recently, my last tenure was at the San Francisco Public Library, where I followed Susan's great footsteps as city librarian there. My experience has been rooted in serving underserved communities. I have a strong commitment to diversity and access to libraries. And it's been a joy to have an experience where I've worked, for example, in San Francisco, worked with other city agencies and nonprofits to establish community partnerships, but also executed the largest capital improvement program for the city of San Francisco in terms of its libraries, 16 renovated libraries and 8 new buildings. And with that experience, I also engaged communities in identifying service priorities and strategic planning. And also every 5 years, we were required by statute to undergo a very comprehensive community engagement process to listen and learn from the community about their service priorities and hours of service for each individual neighborhood. I work closely with our foundation and our friends. And again, I learned a lot about the importance of listening to communities. Most recently, I've engaged in consulting work almost on a kind of selective basis, those communities I really feel excited to work with. So when the opportunity came for Boise and Burke in particular, I was very excited about this. I've worked with the Kansas City Public Library trustees and board engagement recently. And then also the Tacoma Public Library. Susan and I partnered to do a full comprehensive strategic plan that culminated right before COVID in 2020. And then also most recently, I've been involved with the Las Vegas Clark County, which is a large urban library that's also looking at setting priorities and a new director. So I was brought in to engage the board and the executive team to set strategic priorities. So again, I'm delighted to be part of this team and looking forward to rolling up my sleeves and working with you all.
Okay, well, thank you, Luis. It was a wonderful introduction, and I'm Susan Hildreth, currently located in Walnut Creek, California. And as my colleague Luis, I've had a long career in primarily public libraries, but working at the local, state, and federal level. And as Luis mentioned, I did direct the San Francisco Public Library prior to his very strong tenure. And I also directed the Seattle Public Library. And Brian took away my great story of having Jessica Dorr on our steering committee for the strategic plan. But that was a great experience as well. I've served as the California State Librarian, and I also directed the federal agency called the Institute of Museum and Library Services that provides federal funds to libraries and museums, including each of the state libraries. So I'm very excited to be part of this effort. I'm very impressed with your focus on community engagement, organizational analysis, and looking at user experiences. And I've done some recent work in both of those areas. As Luis mentioned, we worked on the Tacoma Public Library strategic plan together. I've done organizational analysis for the San Antonio Public Library, currently working on analysis similar to that for a county library here in California. So really excited to be on this project. My last really permanent full-time position was as the professor of practice at the University of Washington Information School, where I taught community engagement to our graduate library students. It was a very exciting experience, and I just completed a year-long community engagement training with Wisconsin Public Libraries. So I'm looking forward to rolling up my sleeves and working with all of you. We have a great team that we're bringing to you, but also I'm really excited to work with the staff and the community in Boise, which I know is a community that's undergoing a lot of change, and we want to help you provide great library service there.
And Heidi, if I could just mention Carson briefly before we go back to you. Carson Blocks, also a member of our team. He brings great deal of expertise. If he has a business card, I haven't actually seen it because of the world we're living in right now, but it would say library technologist on it. But he's so much more than that. It's not about technology for technology's sake. It's really about technology for enhancing the user experience, and Carson's expertise goes beyond just technology to really think about how to best serve patrons, and also how to do that efficiently. So there is that efficiency angle too to the technology, kind of the back of the office side of that as well. So we're super excited to have him, have him on the team, supporting a focus on user experience and technology.
Wonderful, thank you. And thank you both for joining us today and talking about your experiences and expertise. We're thrilled. So as you can see, we are working with a consulting group with immense expertise in library experience, community engagement, organizational excellence. And Carrie will be bringing the slideshow back up. We've got just a couple more slides. There it is, perfect. Yes, so next slide. Perfect, thank you. So I also wanted to, following up on the discussion we had in January, I want to pick up on the thread about our previous big project. So some of you were involved in it. I'm sure all of you have heard about it, but that was really a building project. And as such, most of the input we received was focused on elements like rooftop gardens, reading spaces, and greenbelt access. So we have looked back through the documents from the Civic Center for Education and Culture, the Library and Arts and History Center. And the information that we want to ensure that we carry forward into this project is twofold. So one is we heard a strong desire from the community that they want to have a voice and multiple opportunities for participation. And two, we heard a preference that we focus on the library system as having multiple points of access. We also want to acknowledge for the board that a future step for us will be to begin a new master facilities plan. The previous master facilities plan for the Boise Public Library System went through 2020. And so our current step, this strategic plan is focused on people, programs, and services, and a new master facilities plan will be a later step. So I wanted to set some context there. And then going to the slide, we are in this strategic plan focus and process. We're turning to community members to understand their needs and desires for library programs and services. Those process goals are that every member of the community and every Boise Public Library staff member will know how to engage in the discussion and provide input. They'll know how our priorities are determined, and they'll know their role in making the plan a reality. And then our outcome goals are a library that is outwardly focused on making a positive impact for the community we serve, and one system with aligned assets that maximize value to the community. So next slide, please. So very briefly, here's our plan implementation schedule that you've seen before. We're in that first column right now, that February column where we're kicking off with the board, which we're very excited to be doing. And then later on, where you all will have project briefings over the next few months, as well as opportunities where we'll detail more some of the roles that you'll have in those community engagement sessions. So we're very excited about that as well. And then finally, we've got just one final slide. And this is where we're at with the next steps. So what we'll be working on is finalizing the strategic planning framework and beginning to build more detailed timeline. We'll be determining staff work groups and committees, and then creating a brand and logo for the project. So we'll be back in March with another briefing on the strategic plan.
Okay, that is a lot of information to digest. Welcome to the BERT team. We're very excited to be working with all of you and having Heidi here in this process. Instrumental. Fellow board members, what questions, initial questions, because I know that there's more obviously to come in next month. We can kind of get maybe a little bit deeper into the weeds, but from an oversight, what are some of those questions that are coming up top of mind? Maybe I'll start with, how about Phil? What questions might you have, Phil?
Yeah, thank you. I was glad you mentioned the previous work on the building project that had been actually gone quite a bit down, well, quite a bit of the ways down the road. And I'm curious from the BERT group, kind of how you would envision using the information that went into that project, and maybe specifically, you know, how old does that information have to get before it's considered stale and not too useful? Because my preference would be to use as much of that as possible, since a lot of good work went into, I think, planning that, and I don't necessarily, well, I think it got derailed for other reasons. So I'm just curious about your view on that.
Sure, I think it's a wealth of knowledge that we want to tap into, and we want to share with the community that we're, you know, seeing at least at a thematic level what was shared with the library during that process. I think it's important to acknowledge that there's a different emphasis here, more on peoples and systems and services. People, programs, and services, and less directly on the capital. But I'm sure you heard lots of information in that process that's directly relevant. I think the only other place I think that we have to give some pause is the world's changed quite a lot since that time. The demographics of Boise continue to change. We've had a massive upheaval in the pandemic that has changed, you know, how people are interacting with each other. And the role of libraries through that pandemic and through broader trends and changes have really changed. So I think it's a useful starting point that we can refresh and build on as we move forward.
Okay. Also, I wasn't here last month, but there was a slide presented with project roles, and it talked about the board, the city council, and then there were steering committees, staff work groups, leadership team, project management team. If it's appropriate, could you talk a little bit about who you put on those different teams? Like who goes on the steering committee, who goes on the staff, who goes on the leadership team? How do those get organized?
That's a great question. And we've been working with Burke over the last couple of weeks of really honing in on that. Currently, the leadership team is the library senior management team, is how we have it planned. We are finalizing the work groups, and those will have different staff that we're working with the senior management team on who would be best suited, and then also trying for opportunities for staff to volunteer for different work groups. Once we get that finalized, we're also working on finalizing the steering committee, which will have people represented from the work groups as well as Jessica and myself. And then we're also working with some partners in the city from IT and from the Office of Community Engagement and some of the others. So we're really using that steering committee to help us show our relevance as one of the key city departments. But we're finalizing those groups over the next couple of weeks.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
If I could follow up on that, is there no board involvement on any of the work groups or the steering committee?
Not on the work groups, and that's something we can consider for the steering committee. We're still talking through what's appropriate, and we still and we've got an opportunity to get some recommendations from our consulting team as well on that.
Okay, I guess I'd just like to, maybe others feel different. I'd be curious what everyone thinks about that, but I guess I'd rather avoid having no board involvement in the steering committee and the work group, and then something gets presented for approval that hasn't really had board input. So I think that would be my 2 cents on that. I don't know. I don't want to dictate where or how that's involved, but I concern a little bit about just having that at board meetings.
I don't think you're alone in that thought process there, Nikki. That would be something that I think we need to have consideration as well.
I think there are different models that we could explore on board engagement. Particularly, I think for me, it's important knowing that you're a new board, haven't had a chance to work together. We have had some preliminary thinking on what could we have you do individually in some of those community conversations, as well as bring you together. We'll flesh that out more. I do want to make sure that we're knowing your own capacity and schedules, being thoughtful about that, but also making sure that when you do come for some of those discussions, you've had similar ways of engaging. So we'll spend some more time thinking on that as we start to put together all the groups and that timeline in more detail.
And I'll just jump in very, very briefly to say other elements we've considered or talked about is to do one-on-one interviews with trustee members very early in the process to get your thoughts about the planning process itself and also the future of the library, obviously. And also to, if we think of the work in sort of 2 phases of information gathering and then subsequent to that, the strategy development, at the end of that first phase of information gathering, it's a super important pivot point and a great opportunity to gather the board. I'd love to say in person, share what we've learned, workshop what we've learned, not a sort of passive presentation, but a real roll up our sleeves and like sort of think about what we've learned and think about some of the larger elements to bring forward in the strategy session. So that's an opportunity as well that could engage the whole board and make sure like everyone's hearing the same thing and on the same page as we move forward into strategy development.
So I appreciate that. I just, from my perspective, our very job, the essence of what we're doing is strategic development of the library. So I don't think it's appropriate to have us kind of left out of that conversation until you present something to us and say, this is what we all decided. Is it okay? So I think we do need to be providing input through that process.
I think Carrie is turning the slides. Could we put up the second to last slide, the project overview chart? Yeah. I'm curious where the Burke consulting engagement ends on this chart. Is it the star in the lower right? Or is it somewhere in between?
Yes, they'll be with us through this entire timeline. And a lot of the work that we'll be doing towards the end of that is really working with them on an implementation plan so that they're setting us free with all the information we need and to move forward with the plan. And I'm sure that we'll be able to check in with them as well. But yes, they'll be with us through this whole schedule.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, thank you.
Yes, thank you.
So I think the takeaway is that you do have a board that is engaged and wants to be a part of the process. We also recognize that we have consultants that are going to help us along the way and give some guidance. But again, as you can see, the board has a lot of questions around the process. And so I know that we're really going to be looking forward to getting into that content in upcoming meetings and being able to strategize and see how we fit within that process and to help move us forward as we'd like to as well. Any additional questions from the board at this phase where we're at in these early stages?
I don't know if it's more a question or more of just stating an intention or something to think about going forward. I'm thrilled to meet the Burke team. It's cool to have you all in this space, and I appreciate the extensive background and experience you bring with working with diverse communities, and particularly those from underrepresented communities. I think that's going to fare very well in Boise, where we're not a homogenous community. Forgive the field trip sound. I'm a public school teacher and we are on a field trip, so they're very excited in the other room. So I think that, number one, as a public school teacher, I'm always very interested on how schools fit into the vision and collaboration and cooperation with libraries, and that being a huge community partner and a voice and sounding board going forward. But also just the process of gathering information from our stakeholders and from our community, that we keep in mind equity and really creative and diverse approaches to gathering all those voices. And the Burke team that's here, I have no doubt the professionalism and expertise that you bring. I'm super excited to work with you. But there are different stakeholders and cultural brokers within this community that just making sure that they are leveraged, because those brokers will help you get into our newcomer population, our refugee population. We've got very exciting that new Afghani families that are showing up like last week, this week, next week. And so that's something that's totally different. So just if there's anything that the board can do to help, connect you to who the brokers are in this community, so we can, diversify those conversations and make sure we have robust feedback from every community member that can benefit from the library. We're there for you. So not a question, small rant, but I'm super excited. I'm really excited to work with this team. So thanks for being here.
Thank you so much, Trustee Galvis. It's absolutely incumbent on us to listen to those voices that have not traditionally have access, and certainly in changing communities. We look forward to working closely with staff and the board to identify those gaps and to identify those communities and influencers to really inform the process. So we hear you, and we appreciate that equity is a priority as well.
And one more thing about language moving forward, sometimes I find in different organizations I work with, and even within the school system, translation and interpretation sometimes is an afterthought. It's like, oh yeah, we've got to get this into Arabic and Swahili, and so maybe just thinking about that, like every piece of information that the community will have access to, are translations available? Is that something we need to get moving on now? Because it takes a minute, right, to get those pieces together. But just putting that at your forefront, the multilingualism that exists in this space. So, thank you.
Thank you for that feedback, Sonia. As always, Sonia has a great perspective from that standpoint. Team Burke, we are beyond thrilled to be working with you. And as Sonia stated, with the expertise and just the background that each of you have, I'm really excited for our community and what we're able to bring to vision and to life here. Anything additional from Team Burke or from Heidi?
Hey, really quick, this is Council Member Halliburton.
Yes, sir.
I just wanted to add that the city is in the process of hiring a language access manager really to specifically address those issues and making sure that language barriers are something that we can help out with. And this is a major, major priority, I know, for both city council and for the mayor's office as well. And so I'm happy to see how we might be able to leverage that position, because this would be a really great project and a perfect opportunity of what we want this position and this work to be addressing. And they, the idea really being that they have a deep knowledge of the different languages that are spoken in this community, specifically with our refugee community and the diverse group that uses the libraries. And so I just think that this might be such a great opportunity to use some of that work already. So I'll make sure that I get that on everybody's radar.
That's exciting, Jimmy. That's good news.
Yeah, I'm glad that you brought that up. That was a good reminder.
So I think as everyone can see, we are beyond looking forward to this process. What's good that will come out of it for our community.
Thank you so much.
All right, thank you, Heidi. Thank
Nice
you,
to meet everyone. Take care.
Thank you all so much. Yeah.
Wonderful meeting you all.
Okay. Bye now.
Okay, next up we have the policy review, and it looks like we've got Sarah.
Yes, thank you. I will be brief. We're reviewing section 3.04, interlibrary loan. We're not recommending any changes to the policy for it of itself. However, we are making some changes to the regulation piece. Similar to the home-based regulation we brought you last month, we'd like to soften the language, changing limits to scope to show what we can do for our customers as opposed to what we won't do. You'll notice a strike through of Ada Community Library. We wanted to make sure that our policy and regulation matched. We didn't have Ada Community mentioned in the policy piece. We also checked in with Ada Community Library. They do not have us included on their policy piece, but with our open access agreement, we do have some crossover and we do share some interlibrary loan duties, but we wanted to make sure our policies were consistent. And then the only other piece, you'll see a strike through the word active, just trying to make that sentence a little clearer. Do you have any questions?
All right, very done.
Very clear.
Great, thank you. Wonderful, thank you, Heidi. Sure. Sarah.
We did a really fast switch,
That.
so.
I think the moment it came out, that was wrong. Okay, moving up next, we have the library director performance evaluation, and this is an action item, and I'm going to piggyback on here with Nikki. First off, I want to thank Nikki. We did some time to, as you remember, last board meeting, you assigned us as a subcommittee to come up with the evaluation for the library director, talk through the process. We already have some great input from Jessica in her research with peer directors and such. And so what we are bringing to you today, as you look through your attachments here, if I can get to the right page. We have a couple of different pieces here. I'll touch on this, and then Nikki, I'll turn it over to you for anything that you'd like to add or I might have missed. The first one that we have here is we basically have 3 worksheets. So we have a worksheet for the library director for her self-evaluation that Jessica will complete. We have a similar evaluation that the board of trustees, we will look to have 2 board trustees as a subcommittee that we hope to select today, that will work on the evaluation after receiving Jessica's feedback and the other 2 pieces to this. The other 2 pieces would be, we also have a similar page that goes to the chief of staff, Courtney Washburn, who as the library director, she also reports directly to Courtney Washburn. And so we will be asking Courtney to give us direct feedback based on her interactions with Jessica over this past year. And then in addition, we also put together 360 questions that we will be presenting in a Survey Monkey, for instance. I don't remember the exact terminology how it'll come out, but we'll be working directly with city HR, and those survey questions will go to Jessica's direct reports and the leadership circle for this year. We put those together, and my recommendation would be that, first of all, have everyone give us feedback, but in the future, probably November, December timeframe, having the board take a look back at the process and reevaluate, and did anything not work as well as what we wanted it to work? Do we have any recommendations to make any changes at that point? Getting feedback from Jessica at that point. And then if there are any changes being made by December, so this can be rolled out sooner in January to begin the process, so we're not a little bit behind like I kind of feel like we are right now. So I'm going to pause for just a moment. Nikki, did you want to add anything additional as we were going, as I kind of briefly ran through that?
I think I'll just point out, so we have our time frame document that's actually at the end of the packet. And as Tanya noted, we're behind this year, but this is how we would anticipate it working in the future as far as time frame. And then the only other thing I'd note is we put on here, and of course, subject to change if folks disagree, that the board president and vice president would serve as the subcommittee that did the review. I mean, the theory being those two are probably the closest working relationship to the director. But I think other than that, Tanya caught everything that I would have pointed out.
Okay, thank you, Nikki. As we did, as Nikki points out, the time frame, taking a step back, just giving some thought to, I think traditionally has been in the past, the board president and vice president doesn't necessarily mean you have to stay along that alignment. As the board president, I have a lot of interaction with Jessica on a monthly basis. I would possibly, take some recommendations. I know Phil has had a lot of activity in the way as a vice chair for the executive director process, like going through all of that, which was, a process. And perhaps maybe Sonia might also have some interest, having been on the board this length of time as well. In addition to myself, I'm more than happy to go through that process. So let's table that piece for a moment. And what I'd like to just kind of take a step back. As board members, have you had a chance to review the documentation? And are there any changes that you would recommend that we make today? If not, I'd like to entertain an action item to move forward on these documents.
I would just like to say this is great. This was an impressive piece of work, producing something where there was nothing. And I appreciate Tanya and Nikki doing this on our behalf. This was great.
Thank you, Brian.
Yeah, I'd like to second that. I think the two of you did a great job on this, and so thank you for putting all that together.
Agreed. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. So hearing that, do I have a motion to accept these documents? The motion to accept and be able to move forward on distributing out to the appropriate parties.
I move that we accept these documents for the review process.
Second.
That work? Does that capture?
The goal was to
Deliver the documents to start to begin the evaluation process.
yeah, I believe that works.
Okay. All right. Just wanted to make sure we caught it since it's a little bit different. All right. So we had a first, we have the
Second.
motion and then Sonia second. Okay. All board members in favor? Aye.
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 None opposed. Motion passes. Thank you. So then the next piece is, do we have an action item to select the subcommittee that will meet, prepare the library trustees portion of the executive director's review, gather, review the documentation back from the 360, Jessica's review as well. And then those two subcommittee members would bring it back to the next board meeting where we would have an executive session to make sure that we've not missed anything and we're capturing all board input for that.
So I just want to make sure I understand what's being solicited.
We're basically looking for the two subcommittee members to complete the performance review on behalf of the board.
Okay, so putting names on things, the
Yes.
process is led by Tanya and Phil.
And I think Sonia actually has some interest in doing it, so
Yeah.
perhaps it's.
I didn't know where to insert or if I can action item myself. I move that I do it all.
Boldly go for it.
Exactly, goal. But I would love to be involved. So where, I mean, can I nominate myself to be on the subcommittee? I would love to help out.
I'm not sure, do you want to take that action item since you had started it? To put the two names out for the group to decide?
I'm still not absolutely clear on what the task is, so I'm sorry.
Maybe, and I apologize, maybe I'm not clarifying as well, so.
I'll step
what we're
in.
doing-
So
Pardon
I would like to make a motion that we nominate Tanya and Sonia as the Director Evaluation Subcommittee on behalf of the board.
I'd second.
Okay, does that,
And did you mention two subcommittees?
no, previously Nikki and I were on a subcommittee prior when we prepared the
I understand.
document.
Okay, all right, I got it now.
Sorry, we're on a subcommittee a few times. Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
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 Okay, motion passes. Thank you, everyone. Okay, up next is, let's see, payment vouchers. So Phil, are you able to do payment vouchers for this upcoming
Yes.
period?
Yes.
Thank you. And then we have our next meeting date is scheduled for Wednesday, March 9th. I will be present. Do we have anyone that would have a conflict on that date?
Not that I know of.
So we're good for the next meeting date? Okay. With that, before we adjourn, Councilman Halliburton, again, welcome to our board. We're just incredibly excited to have any council members. We're thrilled to have you joining us for this period as well that you selected the library. You're going to find that we have just a passion for it, and I look forward to having you participate.
Madam Chair, thanks so much. I actually have a request, and I wish I would have done this at the beginning, but if everybody could maybe just go around and introduce themselves really quick. It's hard to not be in person and not to actually see everyone there, but I do want to get to know all of you. And I've also included my email in the chat on the side. So if any of you would want to reach out, but if you could just let me know at least your name and how long you've been on the board, it would be great just to kind of get things started the easiest way that we can during this hybrid time.
We can't see the chat, but what I can share with you is we do have a board page on the PPL website that has everybody's names and bios and when they joined. And then we'll make sure that we pass on your email to the board members.
So we can go around, we'll go around the room really quick. And shame on me, Jimmy, we didn't get ourselves introduced to you ahead of time. So I'm at Tanya Westensco without the mask there. I am wrapping up my final term on the library board. So I've been here for 2 terms. And so it's with mixed sadness that I tell you that. I'll turn it over to Brian.
I'm Brian Clenny, and I became a board member in September, so I'm still a newbie going through the learning process.
Yeah, I'm Sonia Galavis. I have been on the board 2 years now, I believe. I was able to be a part of the process bringing Jessica on, which best decision ever. Welcome, Jimmy. We're glad to have you.
How about Nikki?
Hi, I am Nikki Pantera. I'm also pretty new to the board. I joined with Brian this fall. I don't know what else you wanted to know. I'm a Boise native and a lawyer by day.
Hi, Jimmy. I'm Phil Magnuson. I think you and I met briefly down at the project this fall. I've been on the board about 2.5 years. I'm flirting with retirement, and I've worked quite a bit in the software product development industry.
Have you met around the room too? Have you met Ed yet?
Joel, I'm a deputy city attorney.
All right. So with that, thank you for setting us on, making sure we got everybody introduced to you, Jimmy. With that, I'll take a motion that we adjourn.
Second.
Oh, you'll make, I don't think I.
Motion to adjourn.
I don't think I can. Okay, so motion and then a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Hi.
None opposed, motion passes. Thanks. Have a great rest of your day, everyone.
Good to
Thank
see
you.
everyone. Thank you for what you do.
Thank you.